Ron DeSantis from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Sewell, I've been a little concerned with what I've heard in two of the colloquies. I know that my colleague from South Carolina, Mr. Duncan, had asked whether the Boko Haram attack on the schoolgirls was anti-Christian in nature, whether that was one of their motivations, and you seem to suggest that it was not. Did I hear you correctly?
I believe what you heard me say is that the attack was against Nigerian schoolgirls.
But you don't think that it was an attack motivated by being anti-Christian at all?
Again, you're asking for speaking to motivation when I'm unable to be in the mind of someone, and I hope never to be in the mind of someone like the leader.
And I don't expect you to, but I do think that...
And of course, in the case of the schoolgirls, I believe it was some 15% of them were Muslim. So it was the education and the freedom and empowerment and the progress that Boko Haram was attacking as it attacked the schoolgirls, as much as it was anything to do with religion. I'm not denying that religion doesn't appear to be a very important factor for the leadership, but that is different from saying it is the sole motivation, and it is different from trying to understand the impact of their actions on Muslim civilians throughout the Northeast.
Well, and I appreciate that, and certainly you can't get into their head. And I don't necessarily say that it's the sole motivation, but I think we have to realize that this is an animating feature. I mean, you can't get into his head, but you can listen to what he says. And he said, and this is quoting from his speech, "We know what is happening in the world. It is a jihad war against Christians and Christianity. It is a war against Western education, democracy, and constitution. This is a war against Christians and democracy and their constitution. Allah says we should finish them when we get them." So clearly, he believes that Christianity, constitutionalism, liberal democracy, he's putting those things together, and he's saying that his belief in his version of Islam is what's motivating him to do that. And I think to try to, I mean, there was a colloquy with Mr. Perry about, are they an Islamic terrorist group? Would you feel confident putting the fact that, yeah, they're a terrorist group specifically operating in the name of Islam?
Well, again, when they recruit people forcibly and make them fight for them, I don't know what percentage of their force is essentially enslaved. What percentage of their force represents the extreme and nihilistic views of the leadership. I agree with you completely that their rhetoric includes significant religious motivation, but it also includes motivation that reflects Westernization more broadly. We know that modernization and Westernization and education, for that matter, is an equal opportunity, inclusive of all faiths process. And so they are motivated by something that goes beyond just Christianity based on what they say and what they do.
But the modernity conflicts with their faith, and that is, and when he started his speech, he said, "My brethren in Islam, I am greeting you in the name of Allah like he instructed we should among Muslims. Allah is great and has given us the privilege and temerity above all people." So the anti-Western posture is flowing from this belief. And it's interesting, you read his speech, he starts getting into all kinds of issues. He says that he believes in marrying off 9-year-old girls. He thinks that's acceptable, and he cited a religious justification, the conduct of Muhammad for that. He defends slavery and criticizes human rights. Again, he cited Islam as the reason for that. He threatens to kill the President of the United States. And so I think what we're dealing with here is, and you see the video of those schoolgirls being forced to wear Islamic garb, being forced to recite the Quran. He's trying to spread this ideology. This group is spreading the ideology by the sword, because they know that it's fundamentally at odds with human reason, and that if these girls are allowed to be educated in that school, they're obviously not going to think that his ideology is something that's very attractive. So that's what we're dealing with here. And I just hope that we can understand the motivation if we try to put a Western frame of reference on how they behave and say, well, maybe it's because they think there's some economic problems or this or that. may be a factor at the margins, but at the end of the day, I think that speech and their conduct make clear what their motivation is. And so I would just hope that we would be willing and always have our eyes open and not try to blind ourselves to reality. And I yield back.